When you bury your parents, you expect everything but mystery. You expect bitterness, tears, endless, hang in there, he was a good man, from people you barely know. You expect long, awkward dinners with relatives you last saw when you were 10. You expect emptiness. But not mystery. My parents, Robert and Margaret, always seemed to me to be an example of what family and love should be. They were the kind of parents who walk hand in hand at graduation parties, sit front row at sports games, call friends over for barbecue every Sunday. They were my anchor. So when they were gone, a car accident, instantly, without a chance to say goodbye, I didn't just lose my family. I lost the very ground beneath my feet. After the funeral, things started happening that no one warns you about. The will. Bank accounts. Taxes. Paperwork. All those cold, sterile files that smell of paper and dust and litigation. My lawyer and I were going through the files in his stuffy office when he pulled out an envelope. Yellow, with a red bank stamp. "What's this?" I asked. The lawyer shrugged. "A safety deposit box number. Opened in your parents' name. Never mentioned." I shook my head. "Never." He slid the envelope across the table to me. "Might be worth checking." 2 days later, I stood outside the marble facade of the old bank on Main Street. Banks had always seemed like strange places to me. Like shrines to money and fears. But today I felt more than just anxiety. I felt I was doing something forbidden. I was met by the manager, Mr. Sanders. Polite, gray-haired, with perfect posture and a way of speaking as if every word was weighed on a scale. He checked my papers. Checked my will. Nodded. "Follow me, please." We passed through a series of heavy doors. Through corridors that smelled of polished wood and cold metal. I could feel my hands trembling more and more. And then we came to a stop. Sanders entered the code. Turned the heavy key. The locker opened with a resounding click. Inside, I expected anything, old jewelry, documents, maybe family heirlooms. But not this. On the shelf was a thick stack of dollars in foreign currency. Envelopes. An old bronze key, worn, as if it had been through dozens of hands. I stretched out my hand. My fingers trembled. Sanders nodded silently and stepped back a respectful distance. I slowly took the envelopes. They were tied with a thin silk ribbon. On the first envelope was a sprawling inscription. "For Andrew. Only when we're gone." My heart thudded somewhere in my throat. I shoved the stack of letters into my backpack. I took the money and the key, too. Though an inner shiver told me I'd better leave everything where it was. As I signed for the receipt, Sanders suddenly said. "Your father came here himself. About a year ago. Without your mother." I looked up. "What?" He shrugged. "I don't know what that means." But he looked upset. I thanked him. And walked away, feeling the cell behind me slam shut completely. Like a door to a world I'd been better off never opening. I drove home in complete silence. The stack of letters burned my back through the fabric of my backpack. The key in my pocket felt heavy, like it weighed far more than a piece of bronze should. At home, I set everything on the kitchen table. Sat across from it. Just sat there. 15 minutes. Afraid to touch it. Afraid to know. Then I took a deep breath. And untied the ribbon. The envelopes were old, yellowed. They had dates on them. The first one was almost 10 years ago. The last one was 3 months ago. A few weeks before they died. And they were all signed in different handwriting. None of them in the mother's. And the first recipient wasn't Margaret. Rebecca. An unfamiliar name, but one that sent shivers down my spine. I sat clutching the envelopes in my hands, feeling dread overwhelm me. Who is Rebecca? Why had I never heard of her? And why was it all hidden so far out of sight? At that moment, I still hoped I'd find an explanation. That it was just some weird family misunderstanding. Oh, I was wrong. I thought she was dead. And then I got her letter. I have never been afraid of letters. For me, they were always something kind, Christmas cards, birthday cards, cards from friends. But when I sat at the kitchen table, in front of a stack of old, yellowed envelopes, I was afraid. Not the letters themselves, but that they would change everything. I tore open the first letter with a shiver in my fingers. The paper crackled like old cloth. The ink was faded, but still legible. The lines were personal. Painful. Rebecca. I can't pretend anymore. Every minute without you is torture. Every morning when I see her around, I think of you. I reread it again. And again. And only then I realized that the letter was written by my father. Not my mother. Not Margaret. It was to a woman named Rebecca. I opened the second envelope. And the third. And the fourth. The letters were intimate. Not dirty, not about lust. Love. Pain. About the life he wanted but didn't have. About how he longed to take their boy back and start over. I knew it was about me. I knew, and it just made it worse. My father, my hero, had spent his whole life talking about honor. Honesty. Keep your word, even if the whole world is against you. Never betray your own. And now I held in my hands the proof that his life had been a double life. One was with Margaret, the mom I loved. The other was secret, with a woman I'd never met. I slowly spread the letters out on the table. Some were long, pages of reflections, confessions. Others were short, as if torn from the soul by screams. I hate myself for leaving you. I live in two worlds. I'm unhappy in both. I'll make it up to you soon. Through those lines, I felt a man who'd been torn apart. A man who chose not love, but duty. And who regretted it all his life. Near the middle of the pack, the letters began to change tone. Before, there was hope and longing. Now it was anxiety. Fear. He wrote that he was beginning to be pushed into a decision. That Margaret suspects something. That time was running out. And always, requests for Rebecca to wait a little longer. Closer to the last letter, her father's handwriting became shaky. The lines broke, the letters slid down. He was scared. You could feel it physically. A letter from 3 weeks before the accident. I'll tell her. Tomorrow. We can't live in this hell anymore. I want to be with you. With him. With him. With me. I folded the letters neatly, but my hands trembled. My fingertips were clammy and cold. I felt as if I'd crawled into someone's coffin. Pulling out what should have stayed buried. I got up from the table. Walked around the apartment. The rain was starting to drizzle outside the window. Small drops dripped down the glass, turning the street into a blurry mess of light. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. There was only one question on my mind. Did she know? Did Margaret know? Was her kindness an act? Or did she really suspect nothing? I went back to the table. Picked up one of the envelopes. On the back was written. K-12. I wondered. Could these really be coordinates? Or codes? Or cell numbers? Safe deposit boxes? Rooms? And then I remembered the key. That old bronze key from the safe deposit box. It was unusual. It wasn't a bank key. More like an old house. Or a warehouse. Or another hiding place. I spread the letters out in front of me again. I tried to put them in chronological order. Each letter is a little puzzle. Each line a clue. I noticed. At first the letters were hopeful. Then there was tension. And then. Just fear. Fear of loss. Fear of ruin. Fear of being exposed. I wondered. What if Dad was really going to leave? What if he had prepared a hiding place for Rebecca and me? That's what the key would be for. And the money. And the secret codes on the envelopes. I started to shake. Not from the cold. From the realization. Everything I knew about my family was a lie. And now I had a choice. To stay in those lies. Or discover the truth, no matter how terrible it was. I sat over the letters until the night thickened into thick blackness outside the windows. The lamp cast long, crooked shadows on the walls. The whole apartment seemed to breathe with me. The rustles. The creaks of the floor. The pulse in my ears. It was as if the world was waiting for me to take the next step. I gathered the letters into a stack. Put the key next to it. I took an empty folder. And wrote one word on it with a marker. Rebecca. Because now her name was the key to my past. And maybe my present. After a night among the letters, I thought I'd gotten over the shock. That it couldn't get any worse. But I hadn't opened the old box of photos yet. The box was found in the same bag where my parents had put the letters and money. It was heavy. Old. With peeling edges. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it. It's weird, isn't it? Some photos can be more frightening than a gun to your head. Because a photo is the truth, frozen in time. A truth that can't be replayed. I carefully lifted the lid. Inside were photos, jumbled together, no album. Some in plastic covers. Some just like that, yellowed, like forgotten letters in the attic. I pulled out the first one. It showed me as a child. A little kid, about 6 months old. In pajamas with teddy bears. Laughing, wide-eyed, staring into the camera. I was being held by a woman. Not Margaret. Not my mom. A stranger. With a warm smile. With wavy brown hair falling to her shoulders. I recoiled. My throat felt dry. I turned the picture over. On the back was handwritten. Our first day together, Andrew. Love you always. No mention of Margaret. Just our day. Our boy. With shaky fingers, I flipped through the rest. More photos. Same woman. The same soft embrace. Same me, small, laughing, happy. Not one Margaret. Not one hint of the life I knew. In one of the pictures, we were in a park. A woman was holding me on her lap, feeding me ice cream. In the background is my father. Robert. Standing at the bench, smiling. Not straining. Not hiding. Like it was normal. Like it was the way it was supposed to be. I dropped the photo on the floor. It fell face down. What did that mean? That Rebecca was my mother. And Margaret, who was Margaret then? A foster mom? The woman who took me in after I'd been taken from another? Or was it worse? I gathered up the scattered photos as if I were salvaging the wreckage of my past. The further I looked, the bleaker the picture became. One album even included scans of some documents. Court papers. Guardianship. Custody requests. And a name. Rebecca Stone. I rushed to my laptop. Started Googling. Name came up tens of thousands of results. But no photo. No address. It was like she'd been erased. Then I remembered a strange detail. As a child, we never had any baby pictures of me at home. When I asked, my parents waved it off. You weren't very photogenic as a child, son. Margaret laughed. We were busy all the time. We had a lot of work to do. Robert would pick up on it. I believed. Why shouldn't I? And now I was looking at dozens of pictures of my infancy. With a woman I'd never known. And with my father standing behind her, smiling like a happy man. Not like a prisoner. Not as a man trapped. Like a father. Like a family man. Only it wasn't the kind of family I was used to. I lay back on the couch with the pictures on my chest. Closed my eyes. I tried to remember. Just one scene from my childhood, with Margaret as my mom. First steps. The first words. The first falls. But there were holes in my memory. It was as if my life didn't begin at birth, but from the moment I turned 3 or 4. Everything before that was hazy, blurry. And maybe untrue. At night, I had a dream. I was standing in a long hallway. On one side was Margaret, smiling, holding out her arms to me. On the other, a woman with brown hair. Rebecca. I looked at both of them and didn't know which one to go to. My feet were planted into the floor. I reached out with both hands, and couldn't reach either one. I screamed. And I woke up. In tears. In the morning, I opened the last envelope hidden under the lid of the box. Inside was another photograph. Only it was different. Dark. Black and white. It was of me. And my father. Standing side by side on some empty plot of land. There's an old, run-down house in the background. The photo was torn off in the upper left corner. Someone had torn off part of it. On the back was a short caption. Where it all began. And that was it. No dates. No names. Just this. I sat with the photograph in my hands. My mind buzzed with emptiness. What do you mean, where it all started? What kind of house was this? And why was his photo hidden separately from the others? I remembered the key. The same bronze key. Maybe it fits the door to this house. Maybe there are answers in there. Or new questions. I realized. I had to keep digging. Even if it destroys everything I believed in. There are times in life when an inner voice whispers, don't. Don't go there. Don't open that door. Don't look for what you've been hiding. And I heard that voice. But I went on anyway. The next morning I decided to start at the archives. An ordinary building on the other side of town, gray, dull, with the smell of old paper and stale air. The clerk behind the counter looked at me over his glasses. What exactly are you looking for? I hesitated. How do I explain that I'm looking for my life? Old custody cases. By name, Rebecca Stone. About 27 years ago. He hummed. We have an archive from that time partially digitized. Just a moment. I was led into a room of computers. I sat there for hours. I waded through databases, half-destroyed scans, crookedly digitized documents. And finally I found it. Case #8471B. Stone Rebecca vs. Morris Robert. Challenging custody of a minor. My heart thumped in my throat. The paperwork was heavy. Statements. Evidence. Evidence. Rebecca was suing for the right to raise me. She claimed that Robert, my father, took me away without her consent. That the custody papers were forged. That she had been accused of inappropriate behavior without probable cause. I flipped through the pages, feeling a tight knot twist in my stomach. All her attempts to win me back had failed. The judges had rejected the appeals. One by one. On the last sheet of the case was. Plaintiff failed to appear at the final hearing. Case dismissed. I blinked. What? I quickly flipped back. Rebecca had attended every hearing. Writing letters. Fighting for me. And all of a sudden, she didn't show up. Just disappeared. I fumbled in my pocket for the bronze key. It was heavy, as if it had absorbed the weight of all those pages. I went back to the counter. Is there anything else? Missing persons from that year? I asked. The clerk shrugged. We could look. Another hour and I found a brief note in the police reports. Stone Rebecca. Age 29. Missing person. Last seen in the Whitmore Lane area. No further notes. No inquiries. No results. It was as if she'd been erased. I sat in the droning silence of the reading room. A pile of facts in front of me, all adding up to one horrible picture. My father had taken me away. Rebecca had fought for me. Then she disappeared. And no one was even really looking for her. I felt the world around me become unsteady. Like I was standing on ice that cracked with every breath I took. On the way back, I stopped by the Whitmore Lane neighborhood. It was a neighborhood that time had forgotten. Old houses with peeling paint. Abandoned yards. No one looked out the windows. I stopped in front of one of the houses. Something about its outline seemed vaguely familiar. I pulled an old photograph out of a box. The same one. An old, run-down house. The same one. I walked closer. The door was locked with a rusty padlock. I pulled out the key. It fit perfectly. A click. The door creaked open, letting the musty air inside. The house was empty. Bare walls. Floors covered in trash and cracked boards. But inside, behind one of the walls, I found an old metal cabinet. The lock was broken. Inside was a drawer. I pulled it out. There was a small box. And some papers rolled up in a tube. I opened them carefully. Letters. Letters from Rebecca. Unsent. Letters to me. Andrew, my boy. I'm fighting for you. I promise I won't give up. I see you in my dreams every night. You are my light. If you ever find it, know I've always loved you. I sat on the dirt floor of the old house, reading those letters. And I cried. Without restraint. No shame. Everything I knew about my family crumbled to dust. They weren't saints. They weren't honest. They built my life on a stolen foundation. And that foundation cracked under my feet. I took the letters. I closed the closet. I went outside. The sky was gray, low. I walked under that sky feeling empty. Like a man without a past. And no future. I knew there was a choice ahead. Either to live with this truth. Or try to find its continuation. And maybe destroy whatever was left of my parents' image. On the back of one of the pictures found in the house was another short inscription. Find me if you want to know everything. When the truth is laid on the table in front of you, it doesn't look like it's described in books. There's no triumph. There's no relief. There's just emptiness. For 3 days, I hardly left the apartment. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters, photographs, scraps of the past. Like an archaeologist finding the ruins of his own childhood. At first I tried to put everything in a logical chain. How, when, why? But the further I dug, the less it mattered. The fact remained. My life was a lie. At times, I looked up at the pictures of my parents on the wall. A wedding picture. Mom in a simple but beautiful dress. Dad in a dark suit, with a shy smile. They looked so, right. Happy. Just like I'd always thought they were. But now there was a gulf between us. A gulf of secret letters. Of stolen destinies. Of dead hopes. I remembered how, as a child, my father had taught me how to hammer the first nail in the garage. How Margaret had laughed when I hid my D's under the mat. How proud the two of them were of me at graduation. Every memory now had a double bottom. Love, yes. But built on theft. On another woman's pain. On a life I never had. I thought of Rebecca. The woman who wrote letters to nothing. Who may have been waiting for a call, a knock on the door, a step, which never came. Where is she now? Is she alive? Is she thinking of me? And, worst of all, had she forgiven me for living without knowing? I put the folder of letters in front of me. On the cover, as always, a simple word. Rebecca. And next to it on the table, an empty envelope. I thought about writing to her. If I knew where. If I knew what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I lived and loved those who betrayed you. Sometimes I'd get up, walk around the room. Sometimes I'd sit back down, open the letters and reread them. They burned through me. Every line was like a scratch on my skin. Each signature like a stab in the heart. I realized I had a choice. I could make a fuss. I could go to the police. I could crack the old case. Find Rebecca if I could. Tell the world that my parents were liars and kidnappers. I could destroy their memories. Or I could leave it alone. I could keep the love they gave me. The life I lived. The memories that, against all odds, were real. Every choice seemed wrong. Every choice cut me up inside. As if whoever I became was a traitor to some of them. At night, I walked outside. The city was asleep. I walked without purpose, hands in my pockets, head down. I walked past the playground where I used to swing with my father. Past the old diner where Margaret used to give me ice cream for good grades. These places were real. And so were the memories. So why did everything inside feel fake now? On one of the streets, I stopped. Just stood under a streetlight. And for the first time in ages, I cried for real. Not out of resentment. Not out of rage. It was because I couldn't choose. Losing both lives at the same time. I got home in the morning. The file was still on the table. And I realized I couldn't live with the weight of it. Not this way, not that way. I organized the letters, the photos, the documents into one box. I put the bronze key in the same box. The last piece of the puzzle. I took the box, went out onto the balcony. I slowly lowered it down on a rope to the dumpster. Like a goodbye. Like betrayal. Like a release. And like a sentence. A day later, I took an old family photo, the one of Margaret and Robert and me. Hung it back on the wall. But now I knew. Knew everything behind those smiles. And I hung it up anyway. Because sometimes a lie isn't a trap. Sometimes a lie is the only thing that keeps us from falling. A few weeks passed. I tried to live. I worked. I read books. I went out with friends sometimes. But there was an emptiness inside me. Silent. Persistent. Like an echo. Sometimes I caught myself thinking. What if Rebecca came one day? Call. Knocks. What would I say? I'm sorry. I couldn't. Or do I just say nothing, unable to find a single word? Some nights I hear her name in the rustle of the wind outside my window. Sometimes I see her face in a crowd of strangers. Sometimes I wake up feeling like I've forgotten something important. Something I carry with me always. I know. This story didn't end. It's just gone deeper. Hidden in the cracks of my soul. And it will live there. Forever. Because sometimes mysteries don't die with the people who created them. Sometimes secrets live on, inside us.